It's our journey to know that's taken us from those very humble beginnings.
It continues to point to a gene-environment interaction.
I distinctly remember sitting there thinking, my daughter couldn't read on Monday, and now she can read.
So I'm hosting my own reading challenge.
Formula that we recommend based on the research.
And we called it Lindamood-Bell Learning Processes.
Welcome to the Lindamood-Bell Radio Podcast, where we explore topics in literacy and learning. I'm Dave Hungerford for Lindamood-Bell. Thanks for listening. Educators, attend one of our live online teacher workshops. You'll learn evidence-based programs that help students read and comprehend to their potential. Our approach is proven effective for dyslexia, autism, English language learners, and more. When you take an online workshop, the price of your complete teacher kit is included, so you'll have everything you need to get started with students. Learn more about our teacher workshops for language and literacy at lindamood-bell.com. Today, I'm with Dr. Dan Brigman from the Lawrence County Schools. He's the superintendent there, and that's based in Dublin, Georgia. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Dave.
Well, I'm really interested to hear about your journey as a superintendent. I know you value literacy quite a bit. And maybe we could just start by having you tell me a little bit about the area that you live in.
Sure.
In the school district.
I'm fortunate to be superintendent of Lawrence County in central Georgia, as you've alluded to. We're a rural district located exactly halfway between Savannah, Georgia and Macon, Georgia on the I-16 corridor. Dublin is our county seat, and we do have a city school system, the city school system of Dublin City Schools in our county as well. So we're a two school system county, We have services for approximately 6,600 kids. We do have pre-K in our district as well, and we are a one-to-one school system in terms of computer technology and Chromebooks being allocated to pre-K students through grade 12. So we're fortunate to be one-to-one pre-K through 12. We are also right at 64% free and reduced lunch population, and we are the third largest geographically sized county in the state of Georgia.
And so the one-to-one means every kid is getting a Chromebook, is that?
Yes, sir. Every kid has access to their own Chromebook during the day. And I failed to mention, we do have just under 1,000 employees too, around 975 employees.
So is that one of the larger employers in the county?
Yes, we're the second largest employer in the county.
And so I've talked with, over the years, so many superintendents and teachers and principals across the country. What are some of the unique literacy needs that you face in rural?
You know, as I could carry on through my career as a superintendent, I can't help but reflect back on my days as a classroom teacher and a coach. And, you know, every educator probably has that experience or that student that they encountered in their past that they really struggled to help master reading and move ahead or even be in the same ballpark with his or her peers. When I was a teacher and a principal, I thought I knew what teaching reading was and how important reading was, but I had no clue about the importance of literacy until I had one pivotal moment in my career. During my first superintendency, it was around the year 2005, I was fortunate to receive an invitation to attend a CEO summit at Oak Ridge National Laboratories in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It was funded by corporate leaders to bring corporate leaders and a select few school superintendents and school leaders together to talk about how can we move education forward, not only in that state, but have an impact across the nation. And during that presentation, there was a gentleman presenting to the group that made a statement that it stunned me, and I left the meeting with the intent of validating what he said. This gentleman, who I highly respect, he is a very, very wealthy leader who owns multiple corporations, made a comment that the state that we were sitting in at that time uses third grade reading failure rates. In other words, the percent of students who do not pass the state assessment by the end of grade 3 in reading is a primary indicator for the number of prison beds that state will need to have available within the next 20 years. Oh. That statement stunned me, and I thought, there is no way, it can't be that obvious that literacy has such an impact on our society. So when I got in my truck to leave that meeting later that day, it just so happened that my board chairman at the time was a superintendent in the prison systems in that state in which I worked. I phoned him and I said, I've got a question for you, and if you don't want to answer it, that's fine, but I hope you can. And I told him what I had heard, and there was a moment of silence on the other end. And he said, yes, that's correct. And since that moment, that pivotal point in my career, I have regained a new understanding about how are we saving children early in the elementary grades from those prison beds. We, as an institution, our public schools, are the only hope a lot of these children have to stop that train from even starting down that track. That's when I became a believer that K through 2, the grades kindergarten through second grade, are definitely our intensive care units in our public schools. We need all resources possible, targeting kids in those areas, those grade levels, to focus and target intervention on every one of those children in terms of their needs, because we can't let 3 years go by or 4 years go by before we start determining who's failing and who's passing. At the end of grade 3, 4 academic years have passed, Dave. You think about that. 4 academic years of a child's life are behind them before most states set that in motion in terms of who's reading on grade level and who is not. So that's why it's important that we have practices in place and processes that are research tested, not research proven, but research tested to make sure children get the resources needed. And that is a non-negotiable that every educator and every leader in public schools must embrace. We can't make up excuses. And prior to my understanding of that, there was a common practice that with the state accountability models, a common practice was to put teachers who were not willing to face the state tests down in those early elementary grades. And I'm not going to use the term we sheltered mediocrity, but we kind of sheltered mediocrity and moved teachers in those untested areas out of fear of accountability. And that was the biggest curse that we could put in public schools, because we need our best and brightest, and we need to devote money and professional development into reteaching teachers how to train kids on how to see text differently, to teach kids how to read. And we've got a short amount of time, K2, to do that and turn lives around. And I have actually seen that happen now, and I can celebrate that. And we have those practices in place right now in Lawrence County Schools, and I'm very proud of that.
How do you think we got as educators to this point? I mean, we've known that reading is fundamental. We've known that reading has been a problem. There are reports back in the Reagan era on the crisis in our reading instruction. There has been so much academic time and energy and research devoted to this over the past 30 years I've been in the career. Why is it not resolved yet, do you think?
You know, that's an excellent question, and I wish I had the answer, but I have some guesses that I will share with you. My guess is that when institutions graduate certified teachers, the ultimate outcome and the goal is to graduate certified teachers to walk into classrooms. So accordingly, we specialize in certain disciplines. But I'm aware of one single institution that dives so deep down into the literacy training, unless that individual is majoring in reading or interventions or special education, very few institutions dive deep down into the research in terms of teaching children how to read. We skim the surface to get the credits and get that certification. Then we move graduates on into the schools with the assumption that the school's professional development plans will include this critical piece. By then, the teachers are coming out of the universities. Time is critical. There's debt acquired. There's a job getting started. So time is often a barrier for retooling teachers in terms of how to teach reading. But I think our higher education institutions need to really focus heavily on practices and processes that give beginning teachers that foundation prior to coming into the classrooms on how to identify and recover struggling readers. So I think it starts with those graduating programs from our universities and our colleges. Another barrier, I think, is realizing the facts that we need to do something differently and devoting resources into those areas to transform lives. I'm a firm believer that if it's important, it will get funded. A barrier I've heard multiple times is we don't have the money to do that. well, what's the price that we're going to pay later on by not teaching a child how to read? I think it's got to be a non-negotiable, starting with boards of education and district leadership. It has to be a non-negotiable, because if we don't, this pipeline of non-readers is going to continue. So it starts somewhere, and it starts with the devotion of resources in the early elementary grades and some establishment of non-negotiables. Once we look at the performance data and we have 30 to 50% of our kids not reading or reading on grade level, we have to allocate resources. So I guess the first thing I think we need to do is identify what are the numbers telling us? What's the data telling us on an individualized basis called personalization of learning, looking at every child, seeing where they're at, and realizing what that child needs, lining up the resources to match that deficit, and expecting change to occur, holding people accountable. And putting the right people in the right place is key.
And I would presume that Georgia has, like most states, the third grade is a real pivotal testing year.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And I'm also interested in your kind of personal journey. How have you been able to implement some of these changes with those early grades, and what exactly have you done?
Yes, that's a great question. It goes back to, speaking of a personal journey, I wish I could brag and say I discovered the Lindamood-Bell Learning processes on my own. As a superintendent in Macon County, North Carolina, I was up there prior to coming to Georgia as a superintendent for 10 years in North Carolina. I was in my office one day, and my special education director walked in my office, and she had 2 teachers with her. And they were passionate about a process and an experience that they had observed at a literacy conference. And they were passionate about it. And they said, Dr. Brigman, we've got to try this. We have got to try this. And I said, well, your passion has persuaded me. Let's look into it, come up with a proposal, and let's present it to the board and see what we can do. So it wasn't even a work day that had passed by, and I was presented a proposal to send 18 teachers through the Lindamood-Bell professional development, or the Lindamood-Bell training. And we were going to host it in our district. And I had a detailed conversation with our Board of Education. They were extremely supportive of this process, and the rest is history. That summer, the first summer we expedited, the learning lab complemented with the professional development piece, I saw 75 children's lives change. And I can attest to that because one of those lives that was changed lives in my house, or lived in my house at the time, and it was one of my own children. My child, early in the elementary grades, had a speech deficit, created a literacy barrier for him learning how to read. So he was not reading close to his peers, and I observed it becoming a social issue with him. He was embarrassed. He didn't feel valued. He wasn't belonging to a certain peer group, and it was a challenge for him, not only academically but socially in his school. This child was a 6th grader. It was the summer of the 6th grade, 7th grade transition, so he was fixing to go into 7th grade. Belonging to the peer group that he's associated with was very important at that time. So when I approved this summer academy and this training module for our summer literacy program, the director of special ed came to me and she said, Dr. Brigman, I just want to let you know that your son qualifies for this summer services. What do you think? I said, well, if the numbers are showing that he'll benefit from this 4-week academy or this 4-week summer literacy camp, let's put him in it. But I don't want him to knock someone else out to get these services. And she said, well, we'll put him on the list of invitees and make sure that no one else is sacrificing participation because of him. I said, please do that. Well, he qualified. He was admitted. And at the end of the 2nd week, I picked him up, and he got into the car in tears. He said, Dad, they're wearing me out. We do the same thing over and over again, and he said, I'm not having fun. I want to have my summer back. I said, son, you're going to hang in here. I expect you to finish this, go through its entirety. It's going to benefit you greatly. But what could I do for you to get you to hang in here with me? And to my surprise, he turned and he looked at me and he said, can I have a cell phone? And I was anti-cell phone as a superintendent at that time. And I just had to eat crow. And I said, son, if you will finish this literacy academy and this summer literacy program, I'll let you pick your cell phone out, but you can't take it to school with you. And he said, okay. So that incentive helped inspire him to persevere and get through the remainder of this Lindamood-Bell Learning Process Summer Academy. And at the end of it, he looked at me and he said, Dad, I know what I'm reading now. I enjoy reading now. So he went from a non-reader, not liking reading, to chasing his little baby brother upstairs at night to read Bible stories for him as he went to bed. And it totally transformed his life. And when I ask him today, son, did Lindamood-Bell help you? And he'll look at me with a little smirk and he'll say, yeah, Dad, thank you for letting me take part in that. So I saw a life transform right in my house. And I'm a firm believer in it, because if it can transform my son's life, it can have a positive impact on the lives of a lot of other children.
Well, that's a great story. Come down to the technology. That's nice.
Yes,
or the bribery, I guess.
Yes, whatever works. Exactly. And what I also learned from that experience, Dave, is it's such an intense process. It's essential that we build some kind of carrot in to the end of the summer journey, or periodically through that journey, because it really it's grueling, but it gets results. And I'm a firm believer in it. So that's what we've set into motion here in Lawrence County, is setting up benchmark incentives for those children to keep rewarding them for hanging in here with us, because they don't know it at the time that they're experiencing the Lindamood-Bell process, whether it be during the school year with the continual interventions and the seat work going on every day, to the summer activities. Having that incentive is important to keep kids motivated and get them to hang in there.
And so you brought that with you to your new district a few years ago, and we partner with you now. All cards on the table.
Yes.
And I know a lot of times when a new superintendent comes into a new district, you have the benefit of having the teachers have their excitement about this approach, and you get to stamp it. Now you come in and you want to start something. A lot of times there's pushback to that. Did that occur with you?
Well, that's an interesting question. I can tell you this has been the smoothest transition for implementing the processes, because we already had some seed sowers in place. Our director of special ed, Stacy Saunders, and her team had already identified the value of it and had some key leaders in the system trained on the Lindamood-Bell process. So when I came into the county as a new superintendent, during my opening comments with the staff, I mentioned the importance of literacy, and I was asked by a teacher in one of our schools, are you familiar with the Lindamood-Bell process? I said, absolutely, and I'm a firm believer in it. She came up and hugged me after the meeting in tears and said, thank God you're here. So at that point, I discovered we had already made a minimal investment in the professional development piece and training teachers, but we weren't fully utilizing these teachers. They couldn't apply the process with fidelity on a continual basis because of time barriers in the schedule. It was restricted to just students who have IEPs. And I broke down those barriers and I said, no. We're going to build in time in every school, every day, so every child can have access at some point through the year to these services, particularly those that need it. In the early elementary grades. It has been a celebration now instead of a barrier to overcome and a sell job. We have had tremendous success now. We've expanded the number of teachers who are trained in the Lindemann Bill Learning Process. We're covering grades K through 12 right now with these services in our district. Primarily, our focus right now is K-5 with an emphasis in K-2 as priority. So we are really making some gains in literacy, especially in grades K-2 throughout Lawrence County, and I'm so excited. But it did help to have those seed sowers in place to help sell this. But what we've also done to fund it is, like I said earlier, if it's a priority, you can find the funds for it. We implemented something called purposeful abandonment, and we did an inventory and a review of every program and process that we have been investing in a school, as a school system. And if we couldn't validate the positive impact those programs or processes were having on teaching and learning, we redirected those funds and we stopped those subscriptions or those partnerships and redirected those funds into what we know are going to be getting those results and moving the needle forward. So that's how we're funding this. We didn't ask for new dollars. We are redirecting funds on old processes that weren't getting the results we needed as a school system. So I'm proud of that. We've done it with minimal expansion dollars.
It sounds like kind of the decluttering movement. It's really popular.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And out of this initiative, we had a conversation early on when I got here in November of 2017. Dr. Rhonda Hightower she's just one of those, she's a mover and a shaker. You have to be careful what idea you toss out in front of her because it'll be going down the road before you even know it with great success. So I mentioned literacy to Dr. Hightower, who is my associate superintendent for curriculum instruction. She assembled a team, an internal team, to get literacy in Lawrence off the ground. And quickly, we identified key players and key influences in our community to help us pull this off because schools can't do it alone. We engaged the library, the county library in the conversation. We engaged Lawrence County's first readers program in the discussion. Get Georgia Reading and Read With Me Facebook challenges were created. So we expedited an all-out assault on engaging the community in this literacy priority with great success. Our hospital at Fairview Regional embraced this concept so intensely. We have several processes now underway in the hospital. Part of this partnership includes prenatal classes in which we provide literacy information to new parents about helping their child become a reader. When the mother delivers her baby, we have read to me onesies that we give them. The little baby looks like pajamas. That says read to me on it. We sign them up to receive literacy text from Talk With Me Baby, that program. We also sign them up with the FIRST Foundation, and that is FERST Foundation, to receive free books each month until the child turns age 5. And we also have more literacy literature about literacy milestones provided to them at ages 3, 6, 9, 12, and 24 months. We also have iPads available in the same-day surgery center and in the pediatric surgery unit, and they are loaded with books for the parents and the kids to access. So the hospital has really been a strong supporter and has realized we have to catch the kids before they're out of the mother's womb to express the value of literacy, because that's where it starts.
Wow. You have we hear a lot about the difficulty that districts have in attracting teachers. It sounds like a pretty desirable spot to be.
We're very blessed. We have had a lot of success in terms of recruiting teachers, and it's a marketing. We have to talk about what we're doing and celebrate our successes. And this Lindamood-Bell partnership is one of our great successes here. And I'm excited about the gains we're making. Another celebration that we've recently had here, Dave, is we had a board meeting in March. We didn't go soliciting feedback and participation in that board meeting from our recipients of the Lindamood-Bell processes. Dr. Hightower was contacted by several parents, and they wanted to come express their appreciation to the Board of Education about the services that we've provided that have turned their children's lives around. So that sparked the idea of having students come in and express their appreciation to the Board of Education, as well as sharing their growth that they have experienced as a result of this intervention strategy. The children wrote written testimonies of the impact these services have had on their lives and expressed the growth they had in their Lexile scores, which were significant growth, 1 to 2 years academic growth in their Lexile scores. So a parent came to me after that board meeting, after we adjourned, and she embraced me. She had tears in her eyes, and she just said, "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you've done for my child. She's a different child now." This is a middle school girl that had struggled academically and struggled socially because she didn't feel like she was involved and smart, and as smart as the other children in class. So I'll go on to say again, academic deficits, particularly reading deficits, do have an impact on a child's social status and social belonging in school, particularly that middle school area in which kids are very vulnerable to peer pressure. So we're trying to change lives in Lawrence County, and we're seeing great success. And I'm very proud to say we've partnered with Lindamood-Bell, and thank you for bringing this service to the Lawrence County school system. And my goal is to continue to refine it and even expand it across all grade levels.
We can appreciate the effort that you go through. Thank you for saying that. Maybe you can describe just briefly, we have a couple of reading programs that one focuses on comprehension, the other focuses on developing the decoding skills needed to read.
Yes.
This sounds like it's much more than that sort of involvement. It's more than just like attending a workshop and then integrating that into your classroom or your small group. I would assume there's some assessment involved that you do. And
absolutely. Yes, sir.
Early grades.
Yes, sir. Prior to my arrival, we had no way to determine who's getting it and who's not in pre-K through 12, or grades K through 2 is our targeted area. When I asked the question, how do we know which second grade students, what children in second grade are reading at grade level and which ones are not? It was a guessing game because we did not have an aligned benchmark or an assessment throughout grades K through 2 in our system, which was a common void in the state of Georgia. So recently, as a result of us getting a significant grant in Lawrence County, we were fortunate to get a reading grant in the state of Georgia for the amount of $2,400,000. So we were very fortunate to have an infusion of money from the state to help us on these initiatives. That allowed us to embed the DIBELS in benchmark assessment in grades K through 2. So now we have access to timely benchmark data to determine what the children need. In addition to implementing that benchmark assessment to address the time barrier and allow time during the instructional day, we partnered with a gentleman out of Virginia. He was a professor emeritus out of the University of Virginia, Dr. Robert Lynn Kennedy, to come in and assess all of our school schedules, our human resources, and how we're structuring our day to help us come up with solutions to have specific time frames embedded into each school schedule every day to give students what they need. As a matter of fact, we now call those blocks WIN blocks, what I need. It's an acronym for what the student needs. That's when we can continually get these services to these children with some fidelity to make sure we're getting every child involved in the intervention strategies throughout the school system. So that took some change and a sell job to the principals and the staff, but once they saw the value of those dedicated blocks in each school day, we're seeing some greater support among the staff, among the principals, and we're seeing some great results come out of those WIN blocks.
Yeah, it seems like such a simple thing to create more time, but I know that there is so much required legally for teachers to get through, so much required in the curriculum that it's like we just got to stay on the highway. It doesn't matter if everybody falls out of the car. I like that concept of the WIN concept.
That's right. And the state determines what we have to teach. They determine basically the 180 days, how long we have to teach it. But essentially, we have control of our academic day. We can structure our academic day to focus on what is important. That day may look differently in the early elementary grades because reading is essential. If a child can't read, why are we trying to split this pie 6 different ways in 6 different disciplines when that reading deficit continues to grow? So we need to devote a lot of our resources and most of our instructional day towards early literacy in grades K through 2. I'm not saying forget about the other disciplines, math, PE. They need to get those doses in a very sensible format in terms of the instructional day and covering those state standards, but our emphasis must be literacy in grades K through 2. And so we try to give the principals and the school-based teams the flexibility to design those schedules around those priority areas throughout our school system. And we've seen some success with that this year.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
And you probably have just about finished up the spring state testing, is that right?
Well, no, it's forthcoming. We have our state test just around the corner, and it'll be mid-May that we start those assessments, and we're excited about the results that we'll be seeing. The teachers have worked exceptionally hard, and it's been an exciting year, but it's been a year of a lot of change in Lawrence County, but I've been very impressed about the level of professionalism and the motivation to move the kids forward academically throughout the grades K through 12. So I'm excited about the results we will see next month.
Right. And what in the county? What comprises like the economic engine there?
Well, that's a good question too. We are on the I-16 corridor, so we have a lot of traffic through I-16, stopping here and staying in our hotels. We have an industry base here. We have a large corporation called YKK, which is probably our largest corporation. We have the hospital, which is a major employer here in town, but it's mostly service industry, a combination of corporate and state jobs.
Interesting.
Yes.
And I know even outside of the school, you've done a lot of work engaging with the community. What are some of the examples of projects that you might have spearheaded there?
Yes, Dave, it has been an amazing outpour of support from the community. Early on in this conversation, the idea came up about books on the bus. You know, the bus ride home and the bus ride to school in the morning is often downtime. So the team came up with the idea, with great support from our bus drivers, of creating containers full of books for the children to read on the bus. So that has been a tremendous success. Those books are taken once the kids get on the bus, and they're put back in the box when they leave, and no damage, and the kids love it. It gives them something to do on the bus ride.
And they're off their phone.
That's exactly right. And another thing that's occurred is a beautiful thing that it occurred. I'm not going to say by accident, because nothing happens by accident, but the idea was shared with our principals about we need something in the communities in these more outlying rural areas. We need some way to have a book depository or a repository or some place where kids and families can get books, exchange books out of the weather, but not depend on store hours. So the idea was created to have little lending libraries, Little, lending libraries. The idea was shared with the principals. Our career and technical education classes, our carpentry classes, built boxes, community library boxes, to be placed in each area of our county, and our art teacher engaged the kids at the elementary and middle levels to painting these boxes. So our high school students built these boxes, our elementary and middle school kids painted them and put characters on them and made them very colorful. So these lending libraries are now in each community, and they are being utilized daily by our community members and our children. And if a community member has books for children that they want to donate, they can bring them to the central office and we'll distribute them to these boxes. So that has been a very rewarding process and has helped engage the community and our upper level students in this process to promote literacy.
Well, that's fantastic. I can definitely picture those. I want to thank you for joining me today.
Well, it's been my pleasure to be with you, David. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I want to thank you for listening to the Lindamood-Bell Radio Podcast. If you like what you've heard, rate us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Lindamood-Bell on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We are Lindamood-Bell Learning Processes.